Welcome to part 2. So we've made our mouse's armature and we've wrapped it with the pink wool and the white core wool just to add some additional bulk, so we've got something that we can felt against when we're adding our bulk sections later on. So the next thing we're going to do is make our bulk sections. So I'm just going to measure our mouse's torso to see how long it is. So it's about just over an inch, so about 1.2, 1.3 inches. So I'm going to move our mouse out of the way. I've got my brush mat in place here, and I'm just going to take a section of wool, so nothing pretty, just a bit of core wool. This is my Shetland white core wool that I like to use. I'm just going to layer it on top of each other, and how I'm doing this, I'm just pulling away the loose sides very lightly. You don't have to pull really hard, because if you pull really hard you actually find that it's harder to remove the strands, but if you just do it really gently, it's really easy. I'm just going to place that on my mat. I'm going to take my 7 needle multi-tool, which has got 7 triangular needles inside, and then I'm just going to felt that down. And we're going to make 3 sections now for his belly. And again, if you've seen the mouse tutorial I did a few weeks ago, probably actually about a month ago now, you'll know what you're doing here. So I'm just going to fold these loose ends over. Fold these loose ends over here as well, so I've got something that's relatively short. Okay, so this piece is measuring about 1.1 of an inch, and then in its width it's about 1.5 inches. So I'm going to remove that one out of the way, and I'm going to bring my core wool back in, and we're going to make a second piece. I'm not going to use quite as much wool this time for this piece. So about that much. All I'm doing with my multi-tool is felting downwards into the brush mat. So really easy, actually quite therapeutic. If everybody wasn't asleep still, I'd be going for it a lot harder. So, and then, not that you need to, I mean it's a really easy tool to use, isn't it? As long as your needles are nice and sharp, you'll be able to penetrate the wool really easily. So I'm just going to fold those sides in there, and then again that. Okay, so that's our second piece. So that is measuring 1 inch by 1 inch. Perfect. And then I'm going to make one last piece for our torso, and this time we're going to make almost like a triangular piece. So again, I'm just going to layer some of that wool on top of each other, and then I'm just going to start off at the top, and then we're going to have almost like a point here, and then widen it slightly down towards the bottom, and then I'm just going to fold my sides in, and this one here. Because we're working with such a small frame, it would be quite easy to make this too large. So it's really important to just keep checking your measurements so we're not making anything too big, because then the mouse will become overly laden with wool, and we don't want that. We want to get that nice balance. And I'm just going to fold down that top part there. And then that measures about nearly 1.5 inches in its length, and then an inch or just under an inch at the shortest part, and then 1.5 inches at the widest part. So I'm going to move those 3 out of the way. So the fourth piece we're going to make is his bottom, and I'm actually going to have quite a lot of layers for this piece because I want quite a bit of volume, not only because I want him to have a bootylicious booty, which is obviously one of the reasons why I want to have quite a thick amount of wool here, but also because I want him to be able to sit down and to stay sat down and not to fall over. So I want to have that kind of nice stable base for him to kind of sit down on. So I'm just going to layer some of these pieces of wool on top of each other. There we go. Don't want it to be too big. And then I'm just going to get my multi-tool again. I'm going to hold it down with my forefinger and my middle finger, and then just felt that down. And this time, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold up one end here from one end here, but I'm not going to felt in the sides. I want to keep those loose because I want these sides to blend in and go round the torso so we get a nice smooth finish to our mouse. So that's our fourth piece. And then finally, we're going to make some preliminary headpieces. So I'm going to go back to my core. So I've got a longish piece here. Again, I don't want it to be too long because my frame is quite small. It's quite dinky. Get rid of that bit there. Layer that on top like that. So this is a little bit longer than the mat. So the mat is, I think it's about 6 inches, is it? Let me just check. Oh, 5.5 inches, nearly. So the mat's 5.5 inches, so it's just going ever so slightly over the mat. Don't worry about that, because we can tear off any unwanted ends. So I'm just going to felt down the middle first of all, and I'm just folding over the piece lengthways, so we're creating a nice straight edge. Away that excess piece there, and I'm going to tear away that excess piece there because I don't want all of that. Then I'm just going to fold over the loose edges. So again, I've got some nice straight edges to work with. I'm doing this very much by eye at the moment because the frame is so small. And it's always a case of less is more with this kind of thing. You don't want it to be too, like I said earlier on, too wool heavy. Okay, so that's going to be a piece for our head. We're just going to make a final piece for the top of our head, just to create almost like a little hat to go on top of the head wrap that we've just made. So all I'm doing is I'm felting with my multi-tool, and then I'm just bringing in a section, felting it down, bringing in a section. So we're creating a very rough circular shape. Like that. There we go. So we've got all our pieces made now to add to our mouse. We've got our 3 pieces for the torso. So we've got the triangular piece we made, the slightly longer piece, and then the slightly shorter piece. We've got our bottom piece here to wrap around the entire body. We've got our head wrap, and then finally we've got our little head wrap cap or hat, whatever you'd like to call it. So the first thing we're going to do is take the shortest piece that we made, which was the second piece for our torso. And I'm just going to hold this against his little body. I'm going to take some medium twisted needles in a needle felting pen, and I'm just going to felt that down. Always be cautious of the wire here, and be especially cautious when we're making this particular mouse because he is a lot smaller than the mouse we made before. So we've got a lot more of a condensed area of wire. So we really want to be careful. And the other thing we want to be careful of, again, because it's a smaller frame, is that we don't end up felting it onto our mat. As you can see here, I've got an incredibly clean mat. I probably need to invest in a new one. Probably could do with a bit of a going over with some Gorilla Tape, I think. I'll add it to my to-do list. Okay, and I'm just going to keep lifting it up so it doesn't adhere to the mat. And then what I'm doing, I'm felting down the sides. So I'm using my needles on an angle, and I'm felting into the kind of the wrap that we've added around the back. So I'm not felting against the wire as such. I'm felting into the little side panel where we've wrapped the wool. I'm just going to turn it around again. I'm just going to felt a little bit down the centre, but not too much. I don't want to break my needles. And then again, I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to felt down that side. Felting finger gloves are definitely a good call with this kind of project because you're working on such a small scale. It's a lot easier to stab yourself. So finger gloves are definitely a recommendation if you can get some. They'll just save your fingers. I mean, you can see here I'm kind of working down here, but my fingers are still kind of quite close because of the size of the armature. So I've added my second piece, and we're just going to felt that down in the same way we did a moment ago with our first piece. The only difference this time is it's slightly longer, so I'm just going to felt a little bit around the kind of the base of our mouse and felt it into the leg slightly. And then I'm just going to felt up into the armpits as well. And then same on the other side, spin him round. felting that down into the side. And then finally just felting over onto what will be the shoulders. So now we've got our second piece added, we're going to add our third piece. So we're going to add that triangular piece that we made, and we're going to place the triangular piece so that the narrower end is towards the kind of the neck area of our mouse, and then the larger, wider end is down towards the legs of our mouse. And again, I'm just going to felt that down. Now our third piece has been added, I'm going to flip him down onto his belly, and I'm going to place the back piece that we made, which is going to start forming his bottom. And I'm going to place it over his back and slightly going onto where his tail starts. So I'm going to place this over his back and again felt this down. So I'm going to start off by felting the central part of the wool first, making sure that you've got equal amounts of wool either side to wrap around the torso in a minute. Spin him round, and then I'm just going to felt this section here in for his bottom. You want to focus on felting the top part of his back a little bit more than the kind of the lower half of this wrap, so we're creating that nice arch. So we've got that bottom shape there, okay? Not an arch, slope I should say, creating a bit of a slope. My goodness, if it was an arch, he's got some serious issues to take him to Mouse Hospital. Right. Right, and then I'm going to fold these loose ends here round. So they're going round the side, covering up these joins here, and going round onto what is his belly. And then I'm just going to felt those loose ends down, and I'm holding it quite tightly because we want to get a nice tight finish to this. And also by holding it really tightly, you don't have to felt as much as well, which is always a bonus. It saves us time then, and we can focus on the more exciting parts of the sculpture. So again, I'm going to pull this around nice and tight, hold it in place, and then I'm just felting away from my fingers downwards. Okay, and just be really cautious that you don't stab yourself. Once that's anchored down, I'm just going to move my fingers away a bit and then just felt down that top part. And then once that's locked down, we can then just felt the sides down properly. So our little mousey torso has now all been added, and if you want to see in more detail how I do this, you can go here where you can see my full mouse tutorial, and there's a playlist with, it's a good few hours of tutorial on how I make these mice, but it's a larger version of this one, but it's effectively the same process. Now I'm going to add my head wrap to our mouse, so I'm going to start off with placing our head wrap on the mat. I'm going to place my mouse onto the head wrap, so I've got about a couple of centimetres on one side to wrap round, and then I've got the rest of the wrap that I've made coming towards me here. I'm going to fold this over where we've wrapped our neck, and I'm just going to felt that down with my needles. I'm just going to use my nail to hold that in place so I don't stab myself. And then once that's anchored in, I'm going to wrap the rest of the wool around our mouse's neck area. And then I'm going to hold it down once I reach the end, and I'm just again going to felt this down so I'm penetrating the wool that I've already wrapped round and the side part of the neck, so I'm not going through into the wire, I'm felting down into the neck. And it's very much a feeling thing. You wouldn't be able to tell on the video. It's when you use your needles, you'll be able to feel where the wire is and where that wool is, where you can felt into. So you can hear there, that's where the wire is. Whereas here, every now and then I might hit a bit of wire, but because I'm going in quite loosely, I'm not really going all guns blazing, I'm not as likely to break my needles. So it's just being a bit tentative with it, not going hell for leather, and you'll be fine. Just want to get a bit more narrowness around the neck. I'm just going to felt a little bit more around here. That just also helps to anchor everything into place. There we go, so we've got our head wrap in place. So the next thing I want to do is add that little hat that I made earlier. So I'm going to take my little circular piece, I'm going to place it onto his head. So I'm going to sit him up and I'm going to hold him down quite firmly, and I'm going to use my thumb and my finger, sorry my nails are terrible today, just to hold that into position. And then I'm going to use my needles to very carefully and slowly, because I do not want to stab myself here, downwards, okay, just so it's felted down a little bit so it's not going anywhere. And then once I've done that, I'm going to remove my fingers and I'm just going to felt this, and I'm felting around the edges, so I'm felting the edges of the circular piece into the head wrap that we've just added. And just keep turning him around until you've got all of the pieces of that circular piece in contact with the wrap, so it's all felted onto the wrap that we've just added. I'm just felting into the centre a bit more as well, just to get a bit more contact with the looser bits of wool. And just get rid of some of that height a little bit as well. There we go, so the head wrap's been added. So he's starting to look a little bit like a mouse, but he's still missing quite a bit of shape. He certainly hasn't got that long, narrow nose that we identify mice as having, and he hasn't really got much shaping down here. So I'm just going to go back to my core wool. I'm going to take a section off here. I'm going to use that piece, I think. And I'm just going to separate it in half like this. So I've got two roughly even pieces. I'm going to put that one to the side for the moment. I'm going to tear a little bit extra away. And then once I've got my slimish piece, I'm then going to fold it over. I don't want it to be too wide because this is going to create our hips. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I'm just going to felt that down so it stays in that position, like that. I'm going to take my second piece and do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Ooh, don't let go. And then felt that down. So now I've got two pieces that are roughly the same size, and they're like little Swiss rolls, aren't they, but without the jam. And then I'm just going to place my first one over the side of his hip, or where his hip would be, so that it then goes onto his leg, okay? And that's kind of helping us to blend the leg and the body into itself. So I'm going to hold that in place. So you want about 2/3 of this section on the body, and then about 1/3 going onto the leg, I'd say. You don't want it to kind of go over the pink that you've added really, but if it does, it doesn't matter too much, as long as it's not completely covering it. And what I'm doing here, I'm going to felt, again like when we added the bum earlier on, I want to create a kind of a slope, so we've got the waist and the hips. So I'm going to felt more firmly into the middle part of the torso, and then allow this to widen and go when it goes downwards. And then obviously getting narrower as we go down to the leg. And once I've added the first hip, I'm going to add the second hip. So I'm going to do that in exactly the same way. So holding it down and then just felt that down into position as well. Okay, so both of the hips have been added. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit more bulk to his bottom. So I'm going to take a little bit more of my wool and I'm just going to fold this over. 1, 2, 3, and I'm just going to place that so that it's covering the lower half of his back. And felt that down. Cheeky red that's got in there, but I'm not worried about that because it'll get covered over when we add the body wrap later. The key with this is all about ensuring that all of your layers are nicely blended. You don't want to have any nasty lumps and bumps. So when you add sections like this, you just want to make sure that the joins are all nicely blended into the next piece, so that when you come to add the body wraps later, you get a nice smooth finish. At this point, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bit of pink to his belly, but I'm going to add it to his lower belly just to give it a bit of colour. Don't need as much as that. So it's just a touch, not loads and loads. I'm just going to place it. It's a bit too much. It's the thing with working with something very small. It's very easy to have too much. I'm going to place it around about here. I'm just going to take those extra side bits there and just layer them on top. I'm just going to felt that down, just so that when we add his body wrap in a minute, he's got a little bit of belly colour to him. There we go. So he looks like he's been on the sunbed a bit too long at the moment, but fear not, it will all come together nicely like a beautiful trifle once everything is added. I've got very bad analogies, so if anybody can help me out with my analogies, that would be great, because some of my analogies really either don't make sense or people are like, no, wouldn't have used that one, Charlotte. So anyway, moving swiftly on, what we're going to do next is we're going to add some additional wraps to our head to make him look a little bit more mousy. So I'm going to go back to my Shetland core wool. I'm going to tear a piece off. It's about that big. It's probably about 4 inches-ish in length. And I'm just going to fold that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to place that over the front of his head. And felt that down. So we're starting to create a bit more bulk around the front of our mouse's head. Hold it down with my finger and felt down those wispy ends of fibre to lock it down, and then I'm just going to felt into the front of our mouse's head. Make sure that you felt around that neck area, because otherwise what will happen is you'll end up with lots of bulk here and then he won't have a neck. He'll look quite odd and unnatural. So you want to make sure that he's got a neck. So make sure you're felting down into that neck area as well and getting that little crease made. Once we've got the first piece added, I'm then going to go and take another section of my Shetland wool. I'm going to separate it in half and I'm going to make 2 equal pieces like when we did the hips earlier on. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Drop that down. And then the same on this one. 1, 2, 3. Make sure it feels about the same. 4. Get rid of those wispy ends. And then these sections we're going to felt onto the side of our mouse's head, because I want to create a bit more volume on the sides of the head, create some nice chubby cheeks. So again, I'm going to felt that loose end there down into the neck, and then just felt down through the centre of the piece so it's nicely integrated with the rest of the head. That's the first piece added, so I'm going to do the same with the second piece. Okay, so your mouse should look something like this now. So we've got the side pieces added and we've got the first front piece added. So the next thing to do is add a second front piece. I'm going to go back to the wool. Got a section of my wool here and I'm going to again fold it for 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4. Tear off that excess. And then we're going to hold that again over the front of our mouse's face. And this is going to help us to blend in our cheek area because we've got these joins here. But by adding this, it's smoothing it off. And we're just going to blend in those loose ends into the side of the head again. So you end up with a nice, smooth area for your face. Right, so he's looking a bit more mousy, but his head's looking a bit flat at the back. And also he hasn't still really got that kind of long mousy nose that we're looking for. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go back to my brush mat and we're going to make a little circular piece like we did for the top of his head, but this is going to be for the front of his face now. So I'm going to just tear off some sections. Got some little bits of wool here that have been torn away that I haven't used yet. Well, that's pink, I don't want that bit. And then I'm just going to take my multi-tool, felt a little circle, and then I'm just going to fold in those loose ends. Where it gets quite thick, it might be quite difficult to penetrate the wool, so just take your time with it. Don't force it, because what will happen is this will wobble and you'll break your needles, so just go careful if you're felting anything thick down on your brush mat. And I've got this panel here now that I've made that's circular and it's quite thick, as you can see on the camera. So I'm going to bring my mouse back in. I'm going to take the panel and I'm going to place it over the front of the mouse's face, holding it down with my thumb and my finger, and I'm just going to felt down those edges. Once I've felted down those edges, Go around the base. And then I can felt down into the centre then. I don't want to felt lots down into the centre because I'm going to lose that height, but I want to felt it enough so that I've got a firm base to then add things onto later when we start adding eyes and noses and mouths and things like that. Okay, so that's looking a little bit more like the shape of a mouse's nose, although we haven't added the nose yet. But once that happens, everything will look a lot more mousy. And then the final thing to do is get rid of this flat head here. So I'm going to take some more of that core wool and I'm going to make a final wrap. 1, 2, I'm just going to go with 3 this time. And I'm going to place this one on the back of his head. And again, this helps to just blend everything nicely. So we get rid of those creases where we added the cheeks earlier, those cheek panels. And I've been using my medium needles for all of this so far. I haven't used any fine needles. And these are medium twisted cross star needles that I'm using. And I like them because they're really fast, firm felters. You can only get them in medium size, but I don't find that to be a problem. They're great for doing any core wool work. So any base of a sculpture that you want to make, I find they're really good. There we go, so he's looking a bit fuzzy, but he's definitely looking more like something that could be living. Looks a bit like maybe a demonic mouse, a zombie mouse, or if you took the tail away, he'd look like some sort of strange teddy bear. But he's definitely progressing. So in part 3, we're going to be adding his wraps and his facial features, and then we're going to be integrating him into the Ludo game and really bringing the whole scene to life. I will see you tomorrow with more needle felting hints and tips, but until then, have a wonderful day, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye.